Alright, we're now on our third Sega Master System episode, and I have already completely run out of games that I played on the system back in my youth, so it's old emulation findings and games in my collection that I'd like to play from this point on. One game that sort of belongs into both groups is called Teddy Boy. Originally called Teddy Boy Blues, as it was themed around the pop song of the same name by Yoko Ishino, who endorsed the game. Teddy Boy Blues was originally released for the arcades in 1985, but was one of the games being ported to the Sega Mark III, the original Japanese version of the Master System, as one of its two launch titles in October 1985, the other one being Hang On. It's a platformer that takes place in some sort of a dream world, as they usually do, and with an attempt at having some sort of an edge over Nintendo Super Mario Bros. Released the previous month. Teddy Boy is a multi-directional scrolling game, which is a bit odd, since the levels are often so small they loop around themselves in 2 seconds. The idea is to shoot all the various types of enemies and collect the small particles they leave behind until the level is cleared, and you need to do it within a given time. After every few levels, you get a bonus level in which you collect bonus points by shooting containers and revealing objects behind them. In some odd way, Teddy Boy feels like a precursor to Bubble Bobble, even though the two games have nothing in common, at least concerning the developer team. It's not a particularly attractive game, but once you get into the rhythm of it, you'll be surprised how you've become obsessed about the game without even noticing it. If you're a Sega fan, Teddy Boy is a necessary game to have played, and preferably have in your collection. It was also released for the Mega Drive as Teddy Boy Blues, but I think the Master System's more simplistic visual approach and its sound chip suit the game better. Next, we have a game that kind of swam its way into my collection as a random purchase. Mercs. Originally released by Capcom into the arcades in 1990 and ported by Sega for the Master System in 1992. Despite my being a fan of Commando, I had no knowledge whatsoever of Mercs being the first official sequel to Commando until well after I had started doing the comparison blog. Sure, I had seen adverts of the game in magazines, but I don't ever recall having any magazine mentioning its direct relation to Commando, otherwise I would have probably been more interested in it. Of course, the relation can be a bit difficult to figure out with a game title being something completely different again. I mean, the original Japanese title is, quite logically, Senjo no Okami 2, Wolf of the Battlefield 2, but for some reason Capcom of America decided to rename it to Mercs instead of Commando 2. I suppose the point of the change was that you play as a different character in each level, so they must have felt like a more descriptive title was in order. Anyway, Mercs is a game that I have tried to play on various platforms without ever really getting the feel of it. I suppose the lack of a recognizable theme tune has a lot to do with it, because the top-down Rambo simulator genre had suffered a bit of a devaluation since 1985. Even the multi-directional scrolling and having a variety of weapons doesn't help the game all that much, because all that had been done before by other games. Having said that, Mercs is not a bad game, it was just released a bit too late to have any real impact, and I didn't really get to appreciate the game properly until I bought it and forced myself to dig deeper into it. At least on the Master System, it's one of the better shoot-em-ups released for the system, but you might want to hunt down the Mega Drive version as well, which features an additional original game mode, which makes the game more interesting. Here's a relatively odd piece of Sega catalog since Golfamania was never released in North America, even though it was reportedly planned to get released as Super Golf. It is a fairly well-known golf game in these parts though, and deserves to be mentioned alongside of World-Class Leaderboard as one of the better golf games for the Master System. Unlike the leaderboard games, Golfamania is played from an overhead perspective, and there is only one 18-hole course, so it seems a bit lacking in content. However, the one real party trick Golfamania does is that it plays a little bit like an RPG. First, it wouldn't be able to pull the RPG-ishness of it off without having a battery save function, which it does. That or a code system which would have sucked, let's be honest, it just never doesn't. Second, if you manage to complete certain objectives, you are given experience points to be distributed to your golfer's skills, those being power, accuracy, and luck. There are 4 play modes in Golfamania, and the RPG-style action comes to play in stroke play and pro tournament modes. If you choose to play in match play mode, though, you get to choose a golfer from 4 possible choices, each with their own specific statistics, which do not upgrade upon progression. Additionally, you get practice mode. Practice and pro tournament modes are single player only. Match play can be played against another player, and stroke play can be played in turns by up to 4 players. One rather notable problem with Golfamania is the unintuitive method of adjusting your swing power. There seems to be no real middle ground in power, just low and high areas, and the more powerful your club in use is, the less of a chance you have of actually hitting the sweet spot. My copy of Golfamania is missing the manual, so I would need to dig it up from the internet, but I just can't be bothered. While Golfamania is relatively lacking in content and a bit half-hearted in playability, it still manages to pull its own weight, and I think it's a fairly solid golf game. I definitely prefer this to Nintendo's golf. Another game that was never released in North America, but us Europeans loved it to bits, is a platforming action game that for the first time ever did a great job at bringing Albert Uderzo's and René Goscinny's adventures of Astérix and Obélix into a video game. It's Astérix from 1991. The funny thing about it is, it took a group of Japanese game developers from Sega to get this to happen properly. Several attempts had been made to bring Astérix and the gang to life on the Atari 2600 by Atari, and several home computers in the 80s by Cocktail Vision and Melbourne House, all to various degrees of disappointment. Sega's take on Astérix is a fairly straightforward action platformer where you must travel around Europe to save the druid Getafix from the clutches of Roman soldiers. The game is played mostly by alternating between the 2 main characters, but you are also given the opportunity to play as Idefix the dog in bonus rounds. Both Astérix and Obélix have their own uses and must be used to accomplish certain tasks, befitting for each of them. There are no more than 8 levels in the game, although each of them are divided into several sections, so there's a lot to do. It's a highly entertaining platforming adventure game in the vein of all the best Disney's cartoon-based games by Capcom, and it's one of the must-have games in your Master System collection. Last but certainly not least, we have Buggy Run from 1993. Which is basically the 8-bit Sega equivalent of games like RC Pro-Am. In other words, an isometric racing game with lots of jumps and bumps and a big emphasis on the necessity of upgrading your buggy with the money you earn from races. Although Buggy Run is probably the most coveted racing game on the Master System, I have a few problems with it. First, it's too damn valuable to be part of any collection for a collector with a budget. Second, it's not playable enough for me to consider it a must-have in my collection. So yes, this is an emulation find, and I'm playing it on my Mega Everdrive for this video. Due to one rather simple yet important reason, RC Pro-Am is the more popular choice, and it's not because it was an NES exclusive. If you've read my comparison of Super Off-Road from July last year, the same problem of alignment corresponding with the car's movement that was exhibited in the 8-bit Sega versions and some others is also a problem with Buggy Run. Not quite as bad though, but when you make progress in the game it becomes increasingly infuriating. Otherwise, Buggy Run is a reasonably fun game, and one of the best racing games from the Master System library. The graphics are some of the best I've seen on the 8-bit Sega, and the soundtrack is excellent. Actually, one of the in-game tunes reminds me of the theme song from Dempsey and Makepeace, which isn't a bad thing at all. But there's actually more to Buggy Run than the RC Pro-Am style racing. There's also a separate 2-player mode, which is played on different tracks in a single screen, Super Sprintile point of view. And then there's a battle mode, which is basically a bumper cars thing. You just need to push off all the other cars to win. This offers yet another variation to how the game looks. So for all its variety, Buggy Run definitely offers more than any other 8-bit racing game I've seen. But when the playability isn't exactly top-notch, you have to consider, was it really necessary to give quantity over quality? Well, at least it's unique in the Master System library and well worth checking out. Too bad it's too rare and valuable to be considered a good add to anyone's Sega library.